Hello, everyone. My name is Sajida. I am here from Preferred EAP, which is the Employee Assistance Program. And I just wanted to begin by saying thank you to all of you for attending this presentation, as this is really an important topic. I'd like to acknowledge that this can be a sensitive topic, and my aim today is to share some information as education with a piece of self-reflection. Know that we chose this title very mindfully. Ignorance is no excuse: how to transform microaggression. Please note also that should there be anything that anyone wants to discuss further, please reach out to EAP to schedule with a counselor. And if you would like to speak with me, that's great too. I'm happy to talk further. Remember that we're a free service for you, as EAP sessions are an employee benefit. And then I'm going to go into my next slide here for this presentation. Know that I'm really excited to be able to do Mentimeter, just to get a sense of this audience. So really, this is completely anonymous. If you could go on your phone to menti.com, this kind of does two things for you, is that it keeps you engaged and reflecting, and kind of know that you're not alone. Sometimes when we see responses, it kind of gives us this idea that there's other people that think the same way or have experienced the same things. And then for me, I get some feedback and some joy, because I think that you'll hop on board when you see the live polling questionnaire. So I'm going to go ahead and get into that. Please know, again, if you go to menti.com, the code is 1930473. So there we go. So the first question that'll pop up for you is, what is your favorite season? Summer, yeah. Happy September to all of you. Yeah, spring. Good. Appreciate you sharing. Thank you. So pretty much the warmer seasons, it looks like. I just have to say that mine would be fall. I really appreciate the changing of the leaves. Oh, somebody else is there. Thank you for joining in. Yeah, and I love the scents, and just the fall season for me is definitely my favorite. Kind of helps that my birthday's in October, so I really like it extra. And no one's really chiming in for winter, and that's okay, although it's coming. But we'll just stay in the moment of where we are for now. That's great. So again, I thank you for participating. And for those people that join in a little bit later, they'll still be able to hop onto the Mentimeter. I just want to be conscious of time. Okay, so thank you, everyone. I want to start out by just kind of sharing a little bit of the agenda. Kind of know that, there's a lot that we're going to go through, but just bear with me, and this is kind of the quick foundation. So I'm going to be talking about an explanation and examples of microaggressive behaviors, how best to respond if you are a recipient or bystander of this behavior to be an upstander, how to respond if you are the person making the microaggressive statements, cultivate healthy conversations and diversity dialogue, and genuinely, my ultimate goal is to really increase self-awareness. So, our world and our lives are definitely multicultural. Each and every one of us is culturally unique. No two people are influenced by exactly the same cultures. Even in our closest relationships, you might find that you and your sibling might have a totally different memory or understanding or perspective being raised under the same roof. That actually does happen. With increases in travel and technology, we encounter more and more culturally diverse people, especially in our workplaces. So I want to acknowledge again, too, that sometimes that can create a dilemma. So generally speaking, we tend to prefer our own culture because it's familiar, it's comfortable, and the world and all our relationships are multicultural. So difficulties arise when we feel that our culture is the right one, the superior one, and when we feel other cultures are wrong, bad, or stupid, or etc. So I want to begin by just kind of checking in with you guys. Tell me, have you heard of microaggressions, yes or no? Woo, that came in at the same time. That was great. Okay. So for those of you that know, I'm excited to kind of share a little bit more. And for those of you that don't know, I'm really happy that you're here so that you can get some education and sort of some input about this topic, because it definitely happens. Okay. And I'm going to give it one more moment here. Anyone else chiming in? Okay, thank you. So have you been a receiver of microaggressions? And for those of you that don't know, that's okay. You can definitely either do the no or maybe, and that would be okay. This is not scientific, just want to get a sense of, where people are at. Okay. So there's a little bit of some questions about maybe, right? And again, I'm glad that you're able to acknowledge that. So we'll go ahead and ask the next question here. Intentionally or unintentionally, have you been a giver of microaggressions? Anyone have a sense of this? Again, not right or wrong, not good or bad. Okay. All right. So know that most people are not purposefully insensitive, right? That no way, not me. Most people are not aware that they were actually even insensitive. It's not something that people do purposefully. And yet, oftentimes when we're told that you said something racist, know that that doesn't mean that you're a racist person. That comment that was made or that action that was done, again, may be out of your awareness and not purposeful. The thing though is that, again, as people, we mess up. We mess up sometimes, and that's just being human. And of course, we want to be able to try to do better, because I have to share with you that regardless of your intention, whether you meant it or didn't, whether meaning that you weren't purposeful, right, that intention is irrelevant, right? Not meaning to still will create the hurt for the other person or for you. So it's really important for us to acknowledge that if and when this happens, that it may not have been purposeful, and yet here we are, there's feelings that have been hurt. And the other thing that's really important for us to acknowledge too is that we all have bias, okay? We are all impacted by our unconscious bias or hidden bias. And these would be the prejudices and stereotypes that form outside our conscious awareness over the course of our whole life. So if we've only been exposed to a certain type of culture or a certain type of environment, then that's kind of all we know. And we have done, EAP has done a presentation on unconscious bias before, so I really invite you to check into that if this is a topic that you would like more information on. I want to focus today on 3 common biases. So there's one that's called the like me bias, and that would be a bias towards someone who looks like you or has a similar background. If you go somewhere and you see someone that sort of looks like you, you immediately kind of connect because there's a like me bias. Then we have what's called a confirmation bias. And this is when we only listen to information that confirms our beliefs or our perceptions. And we just sort of gravitate towards that, and we sort of look at that as, see, this is what I know. See, this is what I believe. See, this is what usually happens. And so that would be that confirmation bias. Then we have what's called an anchor bias. And when we connect to one piece of information and use it to make future judgments. So if I kind of had an idea about something that occurred, and I take that one piece of information and I generalize, I broaden that to then for that to actually look at that future judgment where, I knew this would happen. This is exactly what I thought. And so these are, again, some things that we as human beings all have. And the idea here is to bring them to your awareness, to kind of check in when you kind of hear yourself saying things, or when you kind of hear what's going on in the dialogue in your mind of some thoughts that may come up for you. So sensitivity is a topic that has to be connected to this notion of microaggressions, being aware of the needs and feelings of others, to not hurt or offend others or their feelings, to be aware of how our behavior affects or impacts another, to be aware of how we treat others. Because we don't live in a bubble, things that we go through, things that we experience, our needs, our feelings, our interactions with others, absolutely are a huge part of our everyday interactions. So especially in the workplace, it's really important for us to recognize that that's a very different setting than our personal world. So although both are really important, know that in the workplace, there can be some other consequences to those behaviors. So really invite you to read your employment manual regarding how to treat or not treat others. Consequences can occur. Legal implications can evolve from discrimination, harassment, and bullying. So it's really important to acknowledge, again, in that workplace that there can be some consequences. So it's really important for us to recognize that. And I also want to acknowledge also that, outside of that, that sometimes on that social level, there's a thing called faux pas. The origin is French. It literally means false step. So it can be an embarrassing or tactless act or remark in a social situation. So some synonyms that you might have seen or heard: gaffe, blunder, mistake, indiscretion, impropriety, breach, lapse of etiquette. So I'm just kind of curious and want to recognize where you see yourself in terms of your own sensitivity awareness. So because we're human, because we're vulnerable, we're imperfect, and we are impacted by unconscious bias, I want you to kind of think about your own level, personal level of sensitivity. So high here would be that there's hardly any faux pas, meaning that there's hardly any moments where you have said something tactless or something that was a blunder. Medium, some oops moments of faux pas. And then low would be lots of faux pas. So again, not right or wrong, not good or bad, just want you to sort of check in with yourself and gauge, where do you think you kind of are at? Is it high, where you're really super aware and you hardly make any false steps, any faux pas, any blunders? Medium, oops moments definitely happen. Or low, where, you know what, I've probably been told off way more than I'd care to remember. So as I look at this, a lot of you are kind of the oops moments, okay. And then we have 2 for the high and 1 sort of in the low. So again, not right or wrong, not good or bad. Just want you to get a sense and a feel of where you stand with that. I'm gonna give it another 10 seconds or so. Anybody else want to chime in? Okay. Yeah, and it's not uncommon for most of us to sort of feel like we're kind of in that medium. So, okay, good, thank you. So our sensitivity awareness, sometimes what happens is we just know when we just do it, right? We just know what not to say. Sometimes we're very acutely aware of our environment and we just kind of have that sort of, maybe that nag or that gut feeling or something that's going on that says, you know what, do not say that, right? And that's good. So then we sometimes have this feeling before we say or act, right, that just doesn't seem, or it doesn't feel right. Then sometimes we realize or feel it after the fact, and that's kind of where, we kind of realize, oops, that wasn't okay, right? And at that moment, we really invite you to apologize because it wasn't something that was purposeful. And then there are times, though, that I have to say that we just have no idea. And this could be that my grandchild just won an award and someone who's around you just had some horrible news about their grandchild. We can't eliminate insensitivity entirely. There's no way that we can foretell or be aware of anything and everything that would affect people around us. So again, we're human, we're vulnerable, we're imperfect, and we're definitely impacted by unconscious bias. So I want to ask you again, based on those things that we just kind of talked about, where do you sort of see your personal level of insensitivity? Anything that kind of made you sort of change your answer, or now that we sort of have discussed this idea of sensitivity, where do you see yourself? High? Again, that would be hardly any faux pas. Medium, got some oops moments. Low would be that you have more than a few oops moments. Okay, so as we sort of look at this, again, people are able to recognize and acknowledge that there's kind of this medium, and that's pretty much what we typically see. So again, thank you for participating. Really appreciate your answers there. So to be culturally sensitive, there are a few things that we can do to make sure that we're empowering ourselves to really be very present. And that's to be mindful in the moment, being aware of your feelings, your thoughts, people around you. What are these cues? Where am I? What's happening for me? These are all part of that emotional intelligence to be able to really gauge situations. So we really invite you to pause and think before you speak or act, right? Because sometimes there's this need or urgency to want to just say something. And it's much better for us to be able to just pause and think before you speak or act, simply because if there's something that's been said and you're sort of triggered, right? At that moment, really, you can sort of, and this is a brain thing, is that you can really get hijacked into the fight, flight, or freeze response. So we really want to be aware of that hijack that can happen so that we can slow things down. Taking time to learn about others and their cultures can be really helpful because, again, there's such a richness in being around people that are multicultural and different than us in our experiences. Give the respect that you want, and certainly about this golden rule, right? Do unto others as you would them unto you. And we see this across cultures. There's lots of different sayings that really have the same point, that you really want to be able to give that respect that you want. So when the golden rule, though, goes askew, the result is actually a microaggression. So I just want to be clear here that the word micro in microaggression doesn't mean that these acts can't have big or life-changing impacts. They can really wound people. They're referred to as micro because they often happen in small private situations, and people tend to minimize that. So that's kind of where that sort of came from. Know that in terms of a definition, it's a noun, a statement, action, or incident regarding as an instance of indirect, subtle, or unintentional discrimination against members of a marginalized group, such as a racial or ethnic minority. Indirect, subtle, or unintentional discrimination against members of a marginalized group. That's really the basic theme of all of this in terms of what is that definition. So it's a term used for brief and commonplace daily verbal, behavioral, or environmental indignities that communicate hostile, derogatory, or negative prejudicial slights and insults towards any group. So we're going to definitely give you some concrete information about this and how does this manifest. Just wanted to really give you that foundation, though, of, again, a lot of times these are very subtle, they're brief, and yet they happen more often than we even realize. So let's first talk about some signs where someone who has faced a microaggression, what does that kind of feel like? And really they feel hurt. Oftentimes there's anger, people feel shocked, they feel shamed, and they're kind of sometimes resigned that, like, you know what, this just keeps happening and this is just how it's going to be. So sometimes we see those feelings that kind of come up. They think about the incident long after it happened. Genuinely and honestly speaking, as I've worked with people and even in my own life, sometimes I don't even realize that it just happened and that incident is kind of staying with me. So if you're thinking about the incident long after it happened, that would be a flag for you. You're unsure if they're making too much of the experience. Sometimes, again, it's kind of like, did that just really happen? Or there's this uncertainty that maybe people are feeling like they're overreacting. They're unsure if they should bring it up. Do I even say something? Did this actually even happen? And they're pretty sure that the person making the comment would have said or done the same to another person. And this is a really important key factor to recognizing that this really isn't about necessarily you as an individual, you as a person, really that person who is making these comments would probably say or do whatever that action was to another person, because that's where they're coming from. So when you're seeing this and you're really recognizing that, that's kind of where they're at, these are the things that are becoming flags for you to recognize that a microaggression just occurred. And so there's an internal dilemma that I want to really highlight here. Sometimes we have these intrusive cognitions, these thoughts that are kind of in our head, but sometimes we don't necessarily verbalize them. You might ask yourself, did I interpret that correctly? Like, did this just happen? Should I say something? And sometimes it's, well, maybe if I said something, it might make it worse. Or that they'll probably think that I'm overreacting. If this is going on for you, again, these are flags. Know that most probably a microaggression has occurred. So sometimes there's hesitation to converse about race, right? Because it can kind of feel like it's hazardous or adversarial. And the thing also is that it takes time, energy, and effort. And sometimes people have what's called accrued pain, which really is this fear of an outburst. Like, I have been through these situations so many times that if I were to address it right now, I'll probably kind of lose it because I'm just so sick and tired of having to deal with this. And that would be that accrued pain that sometimes people are dealing with, that again can be that hesitation that I just can't do this right now. So I want to talk about 3 types of microaggressions. There's microassault, there's micro insult, and there's micro invalidation. So for a micro assault, it's the most overt type of microaggression. This, without a doubt, would be what you just absolutely know to be direct, right? So that might be a specific word that might be used to describe people, and it's, you just know that that would be that most overt type. The micro insult is a little bit more subtle. This is when you're kind of like, well, I think that they meant well. And then the micro invalidation would be denying the experience of the microaggression. So maybe kind of like thinking that you're being overreactive, or somebody actually saying to you that you're oversensitive. So when we talk about a micro assault, that's more often conscious. They're explicit derogations characterized primarily by a violent verbal or nonverbal attack meant to hurt the intended victim through name calling, avoidant behavior, or purposeful discriminatory actions. Again, micro assaults are a little bit more conscious and a little bit more direct. A micro insult, often unconscious. They're characterized by behavioral verbal remarks or comments that convey rudeness and insensitivity and actually demean a person's heritage or identity. And the third is micro invalidation. These, again, are also unconscious. They're verbal comments or behaviors that exclude, negate, or nullify the psychological thoughts, feelings, or experiential reality of the targeted person. So I want to go back to that first slide that I introduced here of the three types. You have the micro assault, which is the most overt type of microaggression. You have the micro insult, which is more subtle than a micro assault, and then the micro invalidation, denial of that experience of the microaggression, feeling, again, being overreactive or oversensitive. So I want to go into some examples so that you can kind of hear what that looks like. And again, maybe you've experienced it, maybe unintentionally you've said some of these things. And what we're trying to do here is to really increase your awareness about it. So here's an example, microaggression. You speak good English. Well, the message there is that you aren't American, right? That only Americans can speak quote unquote good English. Again, that would be derogatory, right? So the other one here is everyone can succeed in America if they work hard enough. So people of color are lazy or incompetent and need to work harder. That's kind of the message that people are portraying. And that's sort of what's heard when someone says this, like everyone can succeed in America if they work hard enough. Well, what does that kind of mean? And then this one, smile, you're too pretty for people to not see your smile. Here the message really is your appearance defines what people think of you, either ugly or you have no value. So even in sometimes giving compliments, you might mean something else, but when you're saying things like this that are very sort of vague, know that the messages, especially to someone who is in a marginalized group, this is probably what that message is. This is probably what they're hearing. And so you might see a reaction. So a couple of more that I want to go through. When I look at you, I don't see color. I'm colorblind. Well, that's really denying a person of color's racial, ethnic experiences and their racial, cultural being. So I am the color that I am, and that is a part of who I am. You might have meant to say that I look at everybody as a human being and recognize that that color of that individual, their skin tone, their experiences, their ethnicity, that is a part of that human being. And then the last one that I have on here is you people. So again, people don't realize, they don't really recognize, but the message there is that you don't belong and you're a lesser being. And so it's really important that we're very aware of the messages and what it is that we're actually trying to communicate. So there are three possible ways to address microaggressions. Sometimes people get really sarcastic. They kind of have a smart comeback. Sometimes people stay silent. They just don't even go there. And then the thing about it is that, really invite you to just pause, right? Take a deep breath and know that you have just recognized a microaggression. And that can be very powerful because you're now at least labeling what's just happened. And I have to say that, when a person is denying that they were offensive to you, they may say, or you may have said, I'm not racist. So really recognizing here that what you meant to say and how that message was delivered and what was received from that may be very different. So you kind of ask yourself, if that person is kind of denying that they were offensive, will further conversation be beneficial and productive? What is my current level of stress? Do you have the emotional bandwidth to deal with it? Because the reality is that if you're not able to respond to this non-emotionally, it's probably going to end up in a shouting match or even worse, right? So some internal ways to cultivate healthy conversations about race. So pause, right? Before you ask someone a personal question, and again, this is very specific to the workplace, and also in your own life, before you compare someone to something or someone else, before describing someone's personality, like pause. What are you really asking? What's the message that you really want to get across there? And then ask yourself, what could be the impact of what I'm about to say? Is this comment even necessary? And is it promoting a growth mindset? Like, what's the purpose here, right? And the number one priority at work is to be productive. So if this is going to lead down this, spiral or this rabbit hole, really don't even go there. Those are some good ways of catching yourself. So external ways to cultivate healthy conversations about race: do your own research and learn about historical aspects of race, right? The greater knowledge base that you have, the richer and more helpful the conversation can be, because it becomes about a learning conversation. Create connections. Make and nurture social connections and cultivate compassion for oneself, right? Advocate for justice, positively influencing others. It's a very important part of this. So if you decide to discuss things further, then reiterate that you are not blaming the person. You're only addressing the way the comment or that action made you feel. That's when you're owning what your experience has just been. Explain that instances occur daily and others have made similar comments or actions, again, addressing that idea of accrued pain. And then be open to their input and expression of their feelings, because sometimes when you say something, somebody really recognizes and realizes, that would be that faux pas, this is that oops moment. So there's a difference between a bystander and an upstander. So a bystander would be someone who witnesses a microaggression who does not get involved, right? To be an upstander, that would be someone who witnesses, right, and they know what's happening, right, is wrong, and they do something to make it right. They either say something or they do something, because there's an acknowledgement here that the person is already a part of a marginalized group and they actually lack power. So in order for you to be able to be that upstander, we really want to be able to understand the differences in our cultures, right? So cultural humility is really important, as is diversify experience. Traveling is actually a great way to be exposed to lots of other cultures. Being able to have a diversity in the people that you're around, or places that you go, or things that you try. Those are really great ways to recognize and understand the idea of being that upstander. So there's some phrases that I want to share with you, 3 of them that can help you to engage in that dialogue. So what do you mean by that, right? Being really curious, being really open, like, again, maybe that person didn't even realize how that comment came across. Can you please help me understand your comment? I'm really trying to understand what this was all about. And then if you're that clear about this, it's okay to say, I don't feel comfortable with comments like that. And then you can elaborate that, whatever that comment was. In this diversity dialogue, it's really important that you're quick to listen and slow to speak. You want to get a clear understanding. How do they see? How do they hear? How do they feel? Because it may be an interpretation by you that may not be accurate. So we want to check it out, but we don't want to minimize what you just experienced. Right? So seeking a better understanding of the subject, be open to listening and learning. How did we get here and what really is at stake, right? So being slow to get angry is such a critical piece of being able to have any type of dialogue with anyone, really over any topic. I want to talk about this idea of listening ears. So what are some do's? What are some don'ts? So do believe someone when they tell you of their experience with racism. If they're telling you that they've experienced racism, believe them, right? Don't try to explain, fix, or somehow make an excuse. Well, they didn't mean that, or I don't know, maybe you're this or that, and again, that minimizes what that person just went through. Here they are being vulnerable, telling you that this is what they experienced in terms of that racism. Please try not to, explain it away or fix it away or make excuses. Just really stay with them and believe that. Do be okay with not being able to fix a situation. Sometimes there's nothing that anyone can do, right? And then, the idea here also is that don't assume that your lived experiences are the same. Just because you haven't gone through something doesn't mean that it didn't happen or that it can't happen, because here's someone, again, who's sharing with you that this is what they went through, and you may not be able to fix that. If appropriate, ask what to do. What do they need, right? Not what you can do. So sometimes when someone is sharing something with you, it's really for the purpose of sharing and for the purpose of support and for the purpose of getting comfort. It may not be that they want to really, fix things, right? So don't play devil's advocate when someone says they were racially insulted, right? Don't question that. Don't get into this whole big thing. The reality here is that you might want to be able to really go after things or you may not be aware of how that person has really experienced it. So it's not really about what you want, it's really about what they need at that moment. Sometimes people get really passionate, right? There's this undying support. So some do's and don'ts. Do support those who are standing up for justice and equality. There's lots of activities and things that you can be involved in to be able to support those who are standing up for justice and equality. And the thing about it is, don't make it about you, right? So this isn't about what you've experienced. So if someone's sharing with you something that they've been through, that's not really the time for you to be able to share your own experience. Again, you have to gauge the appropriateness of that situation. In the immediate time, it may just really be listening and being there just to be able to have some space for that person to be able to share what they've been through. This really isn't about you making it about you. And then do explore ways you can contribute resources. Perhaps there's something going on in your workplace that you can really take lead on and take initiative on to be able to acknowledge or find some resources that people can tap into for further information, right? And don't present yourself as an expert. The thing that comes up often when I'm working with people is they'll say, "Oh, well, I have this type of person in my life," or "Yeah, I've been through something like that," and so now all of a sudden, just because they have, some exposure or a friend that they have in their life, now all of a sudden they're an expert. That's not accurate, right? And it's very condescending. So please don't present yourself as an expert. It's really about what that other person's going through. Bring your voice, right? Do speak up when you notice a bias or hear an aggression. When we minimize things and we invalidate what's just happened, it's just going to keep continuing. So please don't minimize and validate what just happened. Do comfort the offended, be brave and speak up, right? Don't ignore the offender because then you're just contributing to this cycle continuing. Do call out of racism or misinterpretation of minority group, and don't speak for anyone. Be careful of speaking to experience, not your own, right? So we really want to be able to not make this about me, to be able to really set that space for us to be able to hear, as well as being able to speak up when we see or hear something. So I want to share with you a acronym. I really like acronyms. I feel like they really help us to take a lot of information and sort of have it in a way that we can really digest. So there is a framework for addressing microaggressions called GRIT, and it stands for gather, so gather your thoughts, restate, so restate the comment, I is for inquire, and T is for take action. Talk it out. It's a teaching moment. So that would be the GRIT: gather, restate, inquire, take action, talk it out, teaching moment. So when we talk about the GRIT, it's actually from Dr. O'Brien. And when you gather information, you really want to gather your thoughts, right? You want to be able to act rather than react. So we talked about that fight, flight, or freeze, avoiding that amygdala hijack, so that you're not being reactive, so that you are not being impulsive, so that you're not hopefully going to regret things. So using quick breathing exercises, taking a few deep breaths, or just a sigh, to be able to give yourself that moment to pause and to really disconnect from that hijack, really interrupt that hijack so that you're really, really present. So it's really okay to be able to just take that breath. And sometimes people actually even count, and that's okay. Whatever you need to do to kind of bring things down for yourself, for you to be able to gather your thoughts. Because if at that moment your mind is going 50 miles an hour, by the time you're even speaking, I don't even know if you realize whether you're going to be making any sense or not. So it's really important to be able to gather your thoughts. And then we have the R for restate. So this is where you restate the comment, right? And that really requires you to listen actively. So that means that you're coming from a place of curiosity and not judgment. Again, perhaps giving them that benefit of the doubt. Perhaps this was something that they didn't quite mean. Maybe when they said to you that, you know, when I see you, I don't see color, what they meant to really say to you was that, again, I really value you as that individual. However, that message is that I don't count, and somehow my color takes away from that. And that's not, again, necessarily where they were coming from. They may not even realize how that could be a hurtful comment. So coming from that place of curiosity and not judgment really allows you to have a dialogue. So the paraphrase here of their comment would be, I think I heard you say, and then whatever it is that you think you heard them say, and then asking, is that correct? Like, let's talk about this. And again, I can really appreciate that in those moments, it can be really hard to do this. And yet, as we are looking to transform these microaggressions, it really requires some effort. It really requires you to be very purposeful. So in that gathering your thoughts, you're really bringing yourself into a place where you can have dialogue. When you're restating the comment, you're really looking to open up that as a conversation. And then when you look at the inquire, you approach the aggressor with curiosity. You explore implications of their actions. You know, sometimes you can actually see the person that this was addressed to, that makes that person really uncomfortable. And the aggressor may not have even caught that, because they're too involved in what they're saying. So if you're that person on the side that you've just witnessed that, really being an upstander allows you to have this information where you can then share that, because maybe that person didn't even know. So that makes it feasible for again, that aggressor to be able to grow. And so the help me understand question can be really helpful here, because again, you really want to know, what did that person mean? What was really happening here? So you can come from a place of just inquiring, right? And then the last one here is take action. So talk it out. It's a teaching moment. Consider starting with, I noticed that our colleague. And sometimes what that can do for the other person is break them out of where they were at, even in their head, because they're not present. What impact do you think your words may have? Sometimes people say things and don't even realize the impact of that, right? And then being able to, again, when you have information, being able to have data. So as you know, and you can really use that as a teaching moment, that maybe you're able to address this idea of accrued pain, right? Maybe you're able to acknowledge that, you know, when you make comments like this, it actually is not inclusive, and it really breaks apart the cohesiveness of our team. So I want to kind of go back to this in terms of our sensitivity awareness, right? Again, we're human, vulnerable, imperfect, and impacted by unconscious bias. So I want you to, again, sort of revisit yourself and kind of think of, you know, your subjective scale of your personal level of insensitivity. High, hardly any faux pas; medium, some oops moments of faux pas; and low, lots of faux pas. So I'm going to go ahead into the Mentimeter and invite you to really kind of do this last check-in. Where do you really see yourself? And again, this is all about increasing awareness, not right or wrong, not good or bad. We're not doing the judgment thing. So what this is kind of, again, saying to me is that, you know, maybe part of this is that you're really aware of maybe your own self or people around you. And the idea of all of this in terms of transforming is knowing that you don't live in a bubble. You affect other people just like other people affect us. Thank you for participating. So I'm curious, did you change your answer from the very first time you answered the subjective scale of personal level of sensitivity? Yeah, so again, not right or not good or bad. Sometimes when we get some information or we sort of rethink something, it can really change our mind, right? So depending on situations, depending on your own experiences, depending on what you've seen, what you've witnessed, how you've handled things, there's lots of factors that kind of contribute to this idea of personal level of sensitivity, including time. Wisdom is something that kind of comes with time. As you're exposed to different situations, things start to change for you. So I really want to thank you for participating, and I want to end with this quote. It's by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and he talks about being a good friend. In the end, we will not remember the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. So when you consider yourself to being a good friend, and again, this isn't just a friend outside of you, but even a good friend to yourself, that those silent moments can really be very hurtful, right? So in the end, we will not remember the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. When you really feel that you've been let down by somebody who is supposed to be there to help, to protect, to comfort, to really be there for you. So any comments, any questions? I want to thank you for being here with me. And I know that you can put stuff into the question and answer. I think there's a tab there. So Tyler is with me, and I'm hoping that if there's anything that comes, that I'll sort of be able to share that. Any questions, any comments? Any aha moments for anyone that you'd like to share? Okay. Well, again, I thank you for your time, and I hope you have a lovely day, and that you really are going to put that effort in to be that upstander. We really need more upstanders in our lives. So again, thank you for attending our presentation, and hopefully you'll come back for others. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.